from the general consumer aspect, there's concerns that this is going to have implications on cosmetics, our lotions, our hemp milk, our hemp food. It's a slippery slope because we're opening up the door to now have to regulate THC content in these products.
That's Hunter Buffington from Agriculture Policy Solutions talking about Colorado Senate Bill 23-271, which, she says, could have wide-ranging implications on the entire industry, not just in Colorado. She's raising the red flag here. This is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock, and today we're talking to Hunter about this bill, what it was supposed to do, how it got hijacked by special interests, and what you, the folks in the hemp industry, should know about it, and maybe what you can do about it. All that and more. We're going to have some nuggets of hemp news, and I would also like to tell you a little bit about my experience at a hempcrete workshop that I attended over the weekend. So first, we'll take a quick sponsor break, and then we'll get right into it. This episode is brought to you in part by Impactful Ventures, an investment and incubation company focused on supporting startups and other initiatives that play a vital role in mitigating the adverse effects of climate change. At Impactful Ventures, they strive to amplify enterprises that bring innovative, green opportunities to the forefront and empower those making a significant impact for a sustainable future. You can learn more at impactfulventures.org. This episode is brought to you in part by I&D Hemp in Fort Benton, Montana, where they believe in the goodness of hemp. I&D Hemp is a family-owned, mission-driven, and environmentally focused industrial hemp food, feed, and fiber company, providing new opportunities for farmers and rural communities. Their mission is to provide innovative agricultural products and services to connect American farmers with the pioneers and businesses that see hemp as a way to bring real and lasting change to our communities and planet. Learn more at indhemp.com. Okay, welcome back to our show. So here we are. It's what's the second week of May 2023. I had to look at the calendar for that. Like, what month is this? Anyway, so here we are in still the beginning of May, one of the best months in Pennsylvania. You've not seen the color green until you've seen spring here in Pennsylvania. So I love the month of May for that reason, because, you know, after the gray of winter, everything is just super green, and you can feel it on your eyes, and it feels good for you. Anyway, so I've got some nuggets of hemp news for you this week, some interesting ones too. This first story comes to us from Politico.com, and it says, Jon Tester wanted to soften hemp regulations and turned to industry officials to help craft the bill. A private email reveals the access given to outside advocates for the construction of the Industrial Hemp Act of 2023. And it was written by Daniel Lippman and Holly Otterbein. So it was just published a couple of days ago, and I'll read you a little bit of it here. It says that when two senators sponsored a bill that would cut red tape for farmers who grow hemp, industry insiders were thrilled but not surprised. The reason? They had been intimately involved in crafting the legislation themselves. The bipartisan bill, which was introduced in March by Senators Jon Tester, a Democrat from Montana, and Mike Braun, a Republican from Indiana, would exempt industrial hemp farmers from certain background checks, testing guidelines, and sampling rules. In statements touting the news, Braun said that the legislation would let farmers tap into one of the fastest-growing agricultural markets, and Tester said that they don't need government bureaucrats putting unnecessary burdens on their operations. Left unsaid was how the bill had come together. Interviews with 6 hemp advocates, company officials, and Senate aides reveal that hemp lobbyists and businesses brought the original idea for the legislation to Tester's office. An email obtained by Politico also shows that in February they got a word-for-word early look at the bill that the two senators would go on to introduce weeks later. Yeah, so this is funny to me. In my opinion, this piece was written essentially to to sort of attack Jon Tester, right? They're saying like, oh, he's being influenced by lobbyists and industry insiders for this. And so they're setting up this narrative that something nefarious is happening here. And so I have a couple of things to say about that. So one, like I said, this story to me was written just to smear Jon Tester, right? Because he is a Democrat in a very red state up there in Montana. And it, to me, seems as if the Republican machine is sort of going after him in the media the way, these things happen. Because you can see this same story now showing up in lots of other, online spaces, usually reserved for Republican conversation, right-wing stuff. It's on Breitbart. It's on a few other places. And they're setting it up that, oh, look, this guy's no good because he's not doing the work he says he's doing. He's having industry write the stuff. But let me just point something out to you. So there's many examples of how corporations and lobbyists and all of those other special interest groups affect legislation. In fact, in 2019, there was a report that was published by the Center for Public Integrity in conjunction with USA Today and the Arizona Republic. The headline there says, "You elected them to write new laws, and they're letting corporations do it instead." And then the story talks about copycat legislation, where think tanks will introduce, fully written bills. They will give these to state senators and congressmen, and they just go through and they get it done. They sort of outsource this stuff to the special interests. So this whole idea is not new, but in this story they're setting it up like Jon Tester is nefarious because of this. But I know that the people who helped on this bill, I know them personally, right? I'm talking about Courtney Moran, Erica Stark, and Morgan Tweet. They're not nefarious. They did not write this bill in secret. It's been talked about here on our show for, I want to say, almost 2 years, right? They've published op-eds in Lancaster Farming about the need for this legislation. They were very open about working to get this legislation done, and they did. And they found sponsors in the Senate to introduce it, Tester and Braun. And it's funny that, the headline is about Jon Tester. It's not actually about Braun because he's a Republican. Now, and I don't like to get into, the partisan politics here. Like, really, that's just, it's so petty and it's kind of boring. And, I like to think of industrial hemp and the space around it as bipartisan or nonpartisan. All right. So that's the news there on this Politico story. I'm sure we could talk a lot about it. Anyway, what do you think about that? Let me know. So moving on to our next story, which comes to us from Africa. I found this on Africa.com, and it says that Hemp Hotel trails South Africa's green credentials. The story says that with 12 stories, a breathtaking view of Cape Town's imposing Table Mountain, and a minimal ecological footprint, the world's tallest building made with industrial hemp is soon to open its doors in South Africa. Workers in central Cape Town are putting the finishing touches on the 54-room Hemp Hotel, which is due to be completed in June. Hempcrete blocks derived from the cannabis plant have been used to fill the building's walls, supported by a concrete and cement structure. Hemp bricks are becoming increasingly popular in the construction world thanks to their insulating, fire-resistant, and climate-friendly properties. Aframat Hemp is now preparing to produce its first blocks made only with South African hemp. Hemp architect Wolf sees this as a game changer to make hemp buildings more widespread in this corner of the world. So that's super cool. Maybe someday I'll get to stay in the South African Hemp Hotel. I'm curious, though, about this hemp hotel architect named Wolf. That might make an interesting podcast episode someday. All right, moving on. Let's go to Europe now. This story here is on businessofcannabis.com, and it says that European hemp leaders launch bid to designate natural CBD a traditional food. The story says that European hemp leaders are to open a new front in the ongoing continental CBD battle by looking to have it classified again as a traditional food. The European Industrial Hemp Association has chosen to act after the Czech Ministry of Agriculture signaled its intent to ban products containing CBD. This followed the European Commission's decision in June last year to halt the processing of CBD novel food applications due to concerns over its safety profile. Consequently, the European Industrial Hemp Association has sought clarification on the traditional status of natural hemp extract products with an Article 4 submission under the EC's novel food regulations. So there's a whole lot more to the story, so you can check it out. I'll have the link on the show page. But just another example of people, government, companies, whatever, not really knowing what to do with CBD or how to regulate it, or it's kind of a mess. All right, here is one that actually ties in with our interview today. This is on hemptoday.com, and it says, Colorado lawmakers say compromise reached on THC levels for CBD, and this was just published on Monday. So very timely. It says that Colorado lawmakers say that they have worked out a compromise in proposed legislation stakeholders had feared would place overly strict limits on CBD. The measure is aimed primarily at reining in highly concentrated Delta-8 THC products, which are synthetically produced from hemp-derived CBD in the lab. The products, which produce a high that mimics that of marijuana-derived Delta-9 THC, have flourished in Colorado and other states amid safety concerns due to regulatory gaps. While this bill would put up guardrails for Delta-8 by placing the compound under rules for Delta-9 products, stakeholders complain that limits in a proposed amendment to the bill would have deprived consumers of access to over-the-counter CBD products, which are legal and can be sold outside of the state's marijuana dispensaries. A fundamental provision in the bill defines hemp and marijuana-derived compounds in three categories: non-intoxicating cannabinoids, potentially intoxicating compounds, and intoxicating cannabinoids. Non-intoxicating cannabinoids, products such as CBD derived from hemp, may be produced, distributed, or sold in Colorado. Under original language in this bill, any hemp product with more than 2.5 milligrams of THC per serving and with a ratio of CBD to THC less than 15:1 would be regulated, levels that stakeholders said would be safe. An amendment to this bill that preceded an April Senate hearing proposed to reduce the maximum THC per serving level to 1.75 milligrams per serving while maintaining the CBD to THC ratio, but restricting such products to no more than 5 servings per container. Those parameters would have made many CBD products off limits, critics of the amendment said. So bipartisan sponsors of this bill say they've now struck a compromise that accepts the 1.7 milligram limit and resets the maximum CBD to THC ratio to 20:1 while removing entirely the limit on servings per package. The compromise came after 2 Senate committees gave their approval to the bill following recent hearings. The Finance Committee approved the measure on a 5-2 vote in mid-April, while the Appropriations Committee passed the bill with amendments 9-1 following a hearing last week, placing it before the full Senate. Further amendments are expected before a final vote in the Senate and before the bill heads to the Colorado House of Representatives. All right, so this compromise talked about here, I think is something that our guest today is taking issue with. She says it's really not a compromise, but this bill has actually been hijacked. So we'll get all into that. But I am going to actually just read you the bill, right? Let's do that. Can I find it here? All right, so just to give you a basis of understanding here, I'm going to read the summary of the bill here at it's on the colorado.gov website. It's the website for the Colorado General Assembly. And this is SB 23-271, intoxicating cannabinoid, hemp, and marijuana. So this is going to get a little wordy, and I don't know. So just Just listen to my voice. Maybe this is like a ASMR meditation for you. I don't know. So anyway, concerning the regulation of compounds that are related to cannabinoids and in connection therewith, making an appropriation. Session 2023, regular session, subjects, business and economic development, liquor, tobacco, and marijuana. Bill summary. Current law requires the manufacturer of cosmetic products, dietary supplements, food products, and food additives, including hemp products, to be registered with the Department of Public Health and Environment. The bill creates a new framework for the department to regulate and register hemp products and certain intoxicating hemp products, and for the Marijuana Enforcement Division in the Department of Revenue to regulate intoxicating products or potentially intoxicating compounds that are or may be cannabinoids. This regulation includes the power to promulgate rules authorizing or prohibiting chemical modification, conversion, or synthetic derivation to create certain types of intoxicating cannabinoids, labeling and advertising requirements, production and testing requirements, inspection, record-keeping, and tracking requirements, and prohibiting the export of a safe harbor hemp product that is a synthetic cannabinoid or that is being exported to a state where it is illegal. Hemp and marijuana-derived compounds and cannabinoids are classified into 3 classifications: non-intoxicating cannabinoids, potentially intoxicating compounds, and intoxicating cannabinoids. Non-intoxicating cannabinoids that are derived from hemp may be produced, distributed, or sold as a hemp product, with the exception of products manufactured or produced for export, which are referred to as safe harbor hemp products. Products containing potentially intoxicating compounds and intoxicating cannabinoids must only be produced, distributed, or sold by a person licensed by the division to produce, distribute, or sell the compound or cannabinoid as a product. The bill clarifies that non-intoxicating cannabinoids, potentially intoxicating compounds, and intoxicating cannabinoids are marijuana or marijuana products for the purposes of the retail marijuana sales tax, and a person must be licensed to manufacture potentially intoxicating compounds or intoxicating cannabinoids. The bill prohibits the following acts: manufacturing, selling, or delivering products that contain intoxicating cannabinoids in excess of limits established by rule. Manufacturing a product containing hemp that is not a cosmetic, a dietary supplement, a food, or a food additive, or an herb. Manufacturing, producing, selling, distributing, or holding for sale or distribution a safe harbor hemp product without registering with the department. Selling a hemp product with a ratio of CBD to THC of less than 20:1 in a container with more than 5 servings, or selling a hemp product to an individual who is under 21 years of age if the hemp product has a ratio of CBD to THC of less than 20:1, or if the hemp product is intended to be eaten or smoked. The penalty for a violation is up to $10,000. The bill specifies factors to consider in determining the amount of the penalty. The bill requires the executive director of the Department of Revenue to analyze the feasibility of establishing a standing committee to evaluate CBD and cannabis-derived products for the purpose of determining and making recommendations regarding their safety profiles and potential for intoxication. The Department of Revenue may engage experts to do this analysis. The bill authorizes marijuana stores and cultivation facilities to buy and sell marijuana seeds and immature plants. All right, there you go. That's the summary on the colorado.gov page. Did it make any sense to me? Sort of. It sort of did. But we're going to talk to Hunter about this, and we'll see what she has to say. Because, like I said in the intro, she's raising a red flag here. Like, this is problematic, she says, for the industry, not just the CBD folks, but potentially for the fiber and grain side of things. So let's see where it goes. Her concern really is about the amendments that were added to this bill, sort of like after the fact, and people didn't really get to see them or review them, and those are some more of the red flags that she's raising. All right, so we're about to get into that interview with Hunter, but I will say, I will just throw this out there. Are you a lawmaker who would like me to read your legislation out loud? Please get in touch. All right. No, seriously. Yeah, let's just get into the interview with Hunter. And I think there's some time afterwards that I'll talk about the Hempcrete workshop I went to this past Sunday at Amerishon Cast Hemp's shop up in Bartow, Pennsylvania. It was put on by the folks at All Together Now, Pennsylvania, and it was sponsored by the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. And Impactful Ventures actually donated a bunch of hempcrete materials, I think the lime binder, to this project. So super cool. Anyway, we'll talk about that after the interview if there's time. But honestly, I published a really short episode last week, so I think this week's episode can kind of balance that out. All right, let's go talk about this Colorado legislation. Hunter Buffington from Agriculture Policy Solutions, welcome back to the show. How are you doing?
I mean, I've definitely had some better, more cheerful days, Eric.
Yeah, you've got a lot going on out there in Colorado. So last week you wrote an opinion piece on Let's Talk Hemp. It was called Colorado Intoxicating Cannabinoid Legislation Threatens an Industry, Fails to Protect Patients, and Endangers America's Children. So from what I gather, this bill, I guess, was voted on last night, and there was a lot of amendments that no one got to see. So it's probably pretty stressful because from your perspective, this has major implications for the industry, right? So first, if you can maybe just give me a high-level view of what this bill was trying to accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. This is an issue that's really going to impact a lot of our hemp farmers and consumers. So last year, this bill was actually prefaced with another intoxicating cannabinoids bill. It was 225. I, along with some of my colleagues, went down to the Capitol and pushed back really hard that the legislature's not scientists, they're not industry experts, and that rather than setting regulation, they should put a task force of experts and scientists together to create the regulatory structure. We were successful. It was really a great opportunity to make sure that we protected farmers, because part of that legislation included a $10,000 fine for a crop that, we're still working to understand how cannabinoid profiling works in genetics. There's a lot of manufacturing, obviously chemistry that's come into it, but the goal was to put in place a task force that could make these recommendations. And while I did not serve on the task force, this is something Colorado's done all the way through the generation of the hemp program. In fact, our hemp program that was originally shot down by the USDA because they maintained stakeholder influence, things that we really wanted, like the remediation. That ended up benefiting the whole industry because it turned out to be included in the final rules. So this idea of stakeholder input and letting the industry drive a lot of the regulations is ingrained in Colorado. And I felt last year getting that task force initiated was a huge win for Colorado and why we were our leaders in the industry. Unfortunately, so let me back up. So this year, we go to the Capitol, myself and quite a few of my colleagues, to support the passage of SB 23271 based on the recommendations from the task force. It wasn't a party atmosphere, but when you can get marijuana experts, hemp experts, and regulators together to come up with a strategy that everybody actually supports, that's in itself we're celebrating.
So what was in that bill that you thought you were celebrating?
Excellent question. So there was a couple parameters in that bill. The 2.5 milligrams of THC per serving size was the recommendation from the task force. There was also a 15-to-1 ratio.
That's THC to CBD. Well, CBD to THC. 15.
Yeah, so 15 CBD to 1 THC. And there's a lot of science that shows that those are nowhere near intoxicating amounts of THC. There's also been 5 years of products that look exactly like these that have been on the shelf and safe. And here's the other point for Colorado, already regulated under our Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment because of food rules that covered supplements and tinctures and cosmetics. So a lot of this work had already been done. That was reinforced. And then I will say that most of us in the industry had conceded to a safe harbor. For me, it was a concession to a safe harbor to allow for this regulation of the products. That was what I thought we were doing.
All right. Explain the concept of safe harbor to me, please.
Yeah, so as I just mentioned, hemp foods and hemp tinctures and supplements, cosmetics are regulated as food under our CDPG, our Department of Public Health. So those are regulated there. That includes the finished products. The marijuana industry then regulates all of their high THC products, including gummies and food products where CBD or THC specifically is added. The intention of the safe harbor was to create a regulatory framework for those finished products to be exported out of the state. Now, I am fully in support of regulating these products. We need to know what's in the bottle. We need to understand where there's heavy metals, if there's contaminants, and no one is regulating those products, not the marijuana industry in Colorado, and it certainly doesn't fall in our hemp foods bill. So while it was a concession for the safe harbor, my justification was that at least we're regulating the products. There's a safety mechanism somewhere there that we really need. Speaking of protecting the children, protecting ourselves when we understand what we're consuming. And so that was a concession for myself, like many others, that the safe harbor would continue with this bill.
All right. I'm still having trouble grasping what it means, like a safe harbor. So like you can't sell these products in Colorado, but these companies that produce them, they have a safe harbor there in Colorado and they can export them to other states. Do I have that right?
Yes, you got it.
Okay.
And
All right.
countries.
And other
Yeah.
countries. Okay. And so
Yeah.
that was a concession. Like you let them have that because like you didn't necessarily agree with it, but it was like a compromise to get things moving.
That and to regulate these products.
Right. Okay.
Somebody
Somebody
somewhere,
had to
please
regulate them.
regulate them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was the recommendations from the task force. Many of the members of the task force were there, thousands of hours from these experts and regulators and scientists. And we literally watched the amendment start to be presented. One of the amendments wasn't even presented during the hearing while we were there. We didn't even see it. And it was still approved by the Senate committee. And that experience at that first Senate committee hearing apparently laid the groundwork for the way that this bill was going to go through, because it happened over and over again. We ended up with 35 amendments. To my knowledge, I want to be clear, it passed last night and all of us are trying to find the final bill. We don't have it.
Oh no. So you think these amendments have affected the original bill in such a way that it's no longer the same bill that you were supporting before?
It's absolutely not the same bill. This is not the bill that the hemp industry was supporting when we went to the Capitol. This is not the bill or the language or the recommendations that came from the task force that was appointed to do this work. And the message that I sent out last week was intended to be alarmist. I needed people to pay attention and to understand what was really at stake. And the title that you read gave me the opportunity to at least question, put it out there. Like, we have a safe harbor, right? With this bill. I think no one really knows that. And man, Eric, I said I wasn't going to talk about this, but one of the final amendments that drove the THC serving size down even further was put forth by a legislator who said that she was protecting the children. While this debate is happening about lowering the milligrams, which means that lower milligram product would go into the dispensary, right?
Okay.
So a typical hemp product that has, and I've worked with quite a few of my farmers and a manufacturing colleague of mine to understand that we're probably talking about 20% of products grown and made in Colorado that have a cannabinoid profile, a naturally occurring cannabinoid profile achieved through breeding and genetics that will take them off the shelves. So when you think about 20% of natural whole plant products that are being removed, that directly correlates to Colorado farmers, and it
Yeah, that's a
directly
fifth of
correlates.
the industry, right? Yeah.
I mean, those numbers are in Colorado, but I mean, I would suspect that they could be applied more broadly,
Right.
certainly in Washington as well.
Okay. So that's what you're talking about, those three things: that it threatens the industry and it's failing to protect patients and then endangers the children. So maybe let's walk me through each one of those.
This conversation around protecting the children by keeping these marijuana THC products off the shelves, right? Putting them behind these age gate restrictions, adding container sizes, all of the things that were not included in the task force. And yet, Eric, there was not a single mention during that floor debate or any of the other debates that I heard about the safe harbor.
Hmm.
How how do we justify protecting children while we choose to exclude conversations around a safe harbor that exports these products? And the recognition that there's also not regulation. That didn't happen.
Hmm. Because you're not really protecting all of the children if, like, maybe they're protecting the children in the state, but everybody else to hell with those kids. Is that kind of
I
what
mean,
this?
it's an unfortunate implication, but the morality certainly has to be questioned because
Yeah.
these products are banned in Colorado. So what's happening?
So what else should people know about this? Why should they care? And what can they do?
Yeah, that has been such a challenging question. And the reason I say it's challenging is because the effects are really far reaching. So for farmers who have been working from the beginning in 2014, on varietals that have a certain effect, that they can be proud of, that they know are safe when they put in the bottle. These are vertically integrated operators. They're going to be forced to dilute their products with isolate CBD. So let's think about that. So instead of going to your local farm down the street that grows the plants that go into your capsules or your tinctures, that farmer is now going to have to go to a manufacturer of an isolate. So they're going to be forced to go to a chemically processed isolate to then add to their product to meet the ratios. So we've just completely perverted the whole plant, full spectrum model of plant medicine using hemp. That's that's not only a tragedy for the farmers, but when you think about the implication for our patients in Colorado has been a medical refugee state for a long time. I have colleagues at Realm of Caring that have shared with me the implications for their patients, and those 20% of low THC products. So that's the other thing that this affects is that these are already low THC products. These are not D8 products or any of the Delta polymers coming from
Right, right,
THC.
right.
So to then have to add CBD is asinine. So that's the farmer and the patient aspect. From the general consumer aspect, there's concerns that this is going to have implications on cosmetics, our lotions, our hemp milk, our hemp food. It's a slippery slope because we're opening up the door to now have to regulate THC content in these products. And from my perspective and expertise in working with animal feed, the standard deviation in our labs, the lack of approved methods, and then you put on top of it this quest for zero. There is no analytical zero when people are testing to parts per trillion on a regular basis.
Right.
And so we're setting up a really inappropriate baseline for how we consider a product to be natural.
So it's like the THC, it should be irrelevant when you're talking about products made from the fiber and the grain, right? That should
Exactly.
just be excluded. But what you're saying is that this bill could have implications on that side of the industry.
Absolutely. We know that the FDA, in their generally recognized as safe notice for hemp seed products, meal, oil, and protein powder for human consumption, established a 10 part per million of THC. Now, and just for context, when that was established, we weren't testing for all of the polymers. It wasn't a total THC number, it wasn't Delta 9, it's literally just THC, because that shows you the distance where we've come in science, right?
Mm.
And right now, myself, I just hosted an ASTM workshop trying to drive method creation and adoption because we're constantly being pressured to go lower. We are now quantifying THC in higher concentrations, or maybe I should say, I'm sorry, lower concentrations, right? Very, very small amounts that are less than the allowable amounts of some heavy metals in our food,
Mm.
some pesticides even. This is gone way too far in concern over a molecule that we've established safety for.
Right, like maybe they should be more concerned about the level of glyphosate in our food rather than the THC levels.
Industrial hemp.
We're recording this on Tuesday, May 9th. So the vote was last night in Colorado. So what, now this bill is like marching its way to Governor Polis's desk? How long is that going to take? And would he veto it? Would he not sign it if enough constituents reached out to him and explained the situation? Does he listen to this podcast? I don't know.
I mean, and that's a very good question. I would say that this is it's really our last chance. Absolutely. It's gone all the way through the legislature. So the only chance that we have to not have this bill move forward into law is from a governorship veto.
Okay.
We've long known that he considers himself a cannabis champion. Whether or not cannabis includes marijuana and hemp has sometimes been a little bit questionable. And I think the safe harbor, the economic impact of the safe harbor, I can appreciate why that's of concern. But when we think about the 20% of hemp products, right, there's also a very large economic impact that's going to be felt more in rural economies.
Sure.
So I think that's a message, plus the patient community. I'm hoping that we may be able to bring patients. Realm of Caring is working on this. This is not my idea, but they're hoping to bring their patients and their family advocates to the governor's office. And I would say that the most effective thing that we can do is to get the press on it, Eric. So if he doesn't listen to this podcast, my hope is that we can share this, spread it as far and wide, so that even if he doesn't listen to it in 2 or 3 days, he knows about it.
Right.
He has seen pressure from other press outlets to call this into question. It's shocking to me right now that there isn't more press on this. So I feel like I don't know, Eric, what do you think about this? This is a big deal, industry killing news, and
Right.
very few people are talking about it.
Well, a couple of questions. I'm curious where the Colorado Department of Agriculture stands on this, but I'm also curious where these amendments came from. Special interest groups, the pharmaceutical industry, like who is trying to, hijack this bill?
Yeah, so I'll address the Department of Agriculture first.
Okay.
And I represent the Department of Agriculture on the Hemp Advisory Committee. I was elected as chairperson. The role that I fill is in regulatory expertise. Imagine that. So I reached out to them early on and asked if they were going to be at the Capitol when we thought we were still celebrating, right?
Right.
And basically they said that they weren't going to be participating in this bill. Like, really, I think it's because we all thought it was done. But then once the stakeholders resolved into 2 agencies, the Marijuana Enforcement Division and the Colorado Department of Public Health, that stepped very far away from regulating this crop at the farm gate. And that's the difference. We have a 0.3 that we've been working with that USDA established. The farmers are familiar with that, even with the talk of 1%, which makes this even more awkward, right? If the farm bill goes to 1%. But this idea that farm gate versus finished product. So farm gate, USDA, Colorado Department of Agriculture really stopped there. But when we talk about this bill being representative of the hemp industry. And Eric, that's really why I'm here today, is because I want to support my farmers and the good actors here in Colorado that have been by my side making the statement that hemp doesn't get you high since 2014. And here we are.
Yep.
Here we are. So the marijuana industry group and a couple of large dispensaries were writing these amendments. We can see their influence. They were definitely in the room talking about taking these milligram serving sizes of THC as low as possible, which is always interesting when they're putting these things into food and all sorts of other products. But we would have thought that the low levels of THC would not have been an interest. But what is of interest is to bring hemp products into the dispensary. So grandma is not going to be able to go to Whole Foods or natural grocers, shout out to my colleague Alan Lewis, to be able to pick up these products. They're going to have to be relabeled, which is an expense for everyone. They're going to be controlled as well. So the implication is that these materials are not safe in spite of 5 years of continuous use, and that they should be treated as intoxicants. And that's where it's such a slippery slope.
Right. Because the marijuana industry is threatened by the synthetic cannabinoids, like the synthetic THC stuff, right? Because they have to go. I guess it's expensive to have a marijuana license, but then here are these hemp folks who are just kind of selling. It's not the same thing, but in the customer's mind, probably something very similar. But we know that Delta 8 hemp is not natural THC in marijuana. There's this big difference there. So I don't know.
And
you mentioned
the pharmaceutical companies. Sorry, Eric. Just to kind of circle back to that, Epidiolex, right, is the drug pathway. We have talked about the implications that put on the industry, the struggles we've had to get designation as food and supplement because of Epidiolex. Well, now we've just blurred the lines further, and we've said that intoxicating cannabinoids are marijuana and should be regulated now as marijuana and sold in the dispensaries. So we're just adding precedent that is going to hurt us in the future.
So you mentioned the Farm Bill. Is there anything that could happen in the Farm Bill besides, that 1% thing that would alleviate some of these issues in the Colorado bill?
Yeah, we've been talking about that. And there's one thing that I am really trying to figure out how to get into the Farm Bill, which is a non-detectable limit of THC. We need an actual baseline where we say at 10 parts per million, I'm just going to use that because it's something we're familiar with, that below 10 parts per million of THC, and my preference would be that we say Delta 9 or whatever. We have to now clarify those polymers, but that we come back and we say below that amount is non-detectable. There's no such thing as zero, right? But at that level, you could say THC free in the labeling. The other aspect is what is natural. And this is something that Montana did well in their pet legislation. Imagine that, talking about some pets here. But that idea of naturally occurring cannabinoids is something that I think that we should be considering in the Farm Bill language. I want these products regulated. The worst thing that could happen to any industry is that we have a contaminant and it doesn't get caught and it takes that industry down. We've seen it before with other products. We're just young enough that this should be of concern for us. We've worked so hard to show safety, to undo 88 years of prohibition. And Eric, it feels like I'm right back in reefer madness with this Save the Children narrative.
Right. I think there probably are, scarier things that will harm more children that aren't THC related or cannabis related. I don't know. Maybe if they want to protect children, they should, look into better healthcare, or look at guns. Let's stop having guns firing at school, whatever. But there are.
I was going to say lead, but that's ironic. That's an ironic connection, right?
Yeah, well, lead in the water, right? Sure. So there's a lot of probably better ways to protect our children. And I believe we absolutely need to protect our children. But is this the way to do it? It doesn't seem like it. All right. So people should just call the governor's office, leave messages. Is that what you're suggesting?
I mean, at this point, I think, but inundating his office with complaints, especially because that, and respond to our media outlets who are calling this a compromise between the hemp and marijuana industries. It was not. It was not. This has turned into a very marijuana friendly bill. There was one or two folks that were representing the hemp industry. One was representing their own product. Another one seemed to be representing the hemp industry, but was enthusiastic about having synthetic cannabinoids being able to go into the market. So those are what I would call special interests.
Hmm.
Those are not the farmers that I represent. These are not the manufacturers who work with vertical operators to create these products, these brands that people love. And I mean, I have one right here. It's one of my favorites. This is Salt Creek Western Slope. This is a tincture. It's 400 milligrams of full spectrum hemp. We don't know what the ratio is. This is a compliant product, but it's going to have to go through an incredible amount of label changes, which is expensive for a farmer to even do.
Right.
And then this goes back to the laboratory issues that we have, depending on where she sends this. When we have a standard deviation that still can be as high as 0.3%,
Right. And then messing with
we've got
those
some issues.
ratios, it's like, I mean, I'm not a scientist. I don't really understand this too deeply, but you hear about the entourage effect, although I've heard some people call it the ensemble effect, where these
Yes.
cannabinoids work together, right? So if you start playing with those ratios, you then maybe lose the efficacy of your product.
Absolutely. And certainly when we think about the cannabinoid profile in genetics, right? There's a whole lot of minor cannabinoids as well as terpenes that work together to elicit a specific, physical response to these products. Topically, right? We know that if you have some THC, you're going to have a better response to pain. If you're looking for inflammation, you're going to go towards more of the entourage effect to allow the CBD to work in all of those things. If we're trying to sleep, we know that we have genetics that increase the CBN. So there's just a lack of understanding when it comes to how this is going to affect what's in the finished product. And like I said, we've now moved away from a whole plant full spectrum option, which I would say is what Colorado is really known for, is being able to have these kinds of products because we've spent the time on the genetics. But once you start heavily manufacturing a product, so you're taking nothing but isolates to create a serum or a tincture, that's no longer whole plant full spectrum. And that's also where we start to see um, distillate, isolate, chemically synthesized um, molecules, because the molecules are not stable on their own in these plants. You cannot get them unless they're working together in this whole full spectrum product. And so, that for me at the end of the day is also where we start to blur the lines between a pharmaceutical. I've spent a lot of time looking at medicated feed, drug feed versus non-medicated feed. And we as an industry have made some pretty serious mistakes. Epidiolex being the first approval. I didn't know. I worked on that. None of us knew. We thought that the FDA was going to be working with us for this 3 designation of food, supplement, and pharmaceutical. Right now, we know that apparently the FDA didn't intend to do any of those things.
Hmm.
And while they sit back, we're setting these really terrible precedents about what is a hemp product. And now we've got synthetic THC. And in my opinion, the second that we say it's synthetic THC is a controlled substance. So for me, and this is what I do, right? Is I read policy and I affirm compliance. It's really difficult. And The other thing that I would say about this bill is that it understands this. There is allocation to court cases. They understand the implications that this is going to trigger, and yet was still not discussed on the debate floor. It was complete, like, no, I don't even know if anybody knows that, Eric. Like, it's terrible for me to be the spokesperson of that. I'm sure you can imagine, of all the work that I've done, this is really painful.
Right. Is Colorado like a battleground state in the war between hemp and marijuana?
I think so. We're not the only one. And this is part of my alarm as well. And part of the why I said, no children are safe, because the implications are massive. And I worked very closely with associates at the Association of Western Hemp Professionals while the legislation in Washington was going through the process. And that one is even worse and more tragic. Again, this idea, and they said it in Washington, they're saying it here, that they're going to fix it in rulemaking. I always say rules are great, but who's watching, right? Mm-hmm. Who's at the table and who's watching those rules be made? Washington went to a non-detectable limit of THC. So this means that it's up to enforcement. So, and I had a conversation with a Tennessee Department of Agriculture professional, and we talked about this as well, that the implication is Costco, with their 5-pound bags of hemp seed hearts, they're not going to put those hearts behind lock and key. But if you go to a rural store, a King Soopers, it's going to be up to the manager's discretion as to how they treat those products. So we could very much, it's possible that we're going to see hemp seed milk, hemp seed hearts, these lotion products next to D8 behind the lock.
Yeah, no way. That's not going to happen.
It's the worst possible scenario, Eric. And the Department of Agriculture expert that I was talking to told me that it was probable.
That's terrifying.
So it is terrifying. And now we've got Washington, and now we've got Colorado. And the reason that I brought up Tennessee in that conversation is you said, well, what about the states that don't have medical marijuana? And they're reacting even more strongly than we are, because guess what's getting exported to their states?
Delta 8.
Yep.
Yeah, it's nuts. Wow. All right. Well, I know you have a busy schedule to get back to, and I appreciate you taking some time with me today. Like I said earlier, we're recording here on Tuesday the 9th, going to publish it tomorrow on the 10th. So people will have time to take some action here. Call the governor of Colorado, send an email to his office. I'll put a link on the show page for this episode on how you can do that. So Hunter Buffington, thank you for your time today, and good luck with everything, and thank you for doing what you do.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate it. I am really here for the farmers and a sustainable hemp supply chain in the U.S. I want to see that be successful, and sometimes we got to cause a little bit of a ruckus. So thank you for hosting me, and I would also just say thank you to your listeners for listening. And anytime that you can tell people what's happening here and let them hear your voice as the hemp industry, I think that's one of the most powerful things that we can do right now.
Excellent. Thank you, Hunter. All right, there you go. So I am super curious what you all think about this. If you want to reach out to me and share your opinions, please do. Send an email to podcast@lancasterfarming.com. It's really hard to tell from here in Pennsylvania, what's happening out there in Colorado. So I do appreciate, getting to talk to people around the country about these important issues. All right, speaking of people from around the country, this past Sunday I went up to a hempcrete workshop. It was hosted by All Together Now Pennsylvania at Amerishon Cast Hemp's shop there in Bartow. there were like 40 to 50 people there and, from all over the country. And they were there to learn how to, mix hempcrete, how to do cast in place. And then there was a demonstration of the eVreezy spray applied method too. So we're just going to listen to a few snippets of interviews that I conducted while I was there. And just a heads up on some of these interviews, the sound quality is not super good because there was an air compressor running in the background. Anyway, we're going to first hear from Monica Medina McCurdy, who was on the show a couple of months ago talking about this very workshop. Just first tell me what the event is.
Sure, yeah. So the Hempcrete Workshop is sponsored by the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture with support by Impactful Ventures and the Pennsylvania Hemp Industry Council. And it's being put on by Americhamp, who's owned founded by Cameron McIntosh, and altogether now Pennsylvania, our role is just to really help with organizing, logistics, and marketing of the event. And we are putting on a 2-day workshop where people, whether they're actually builders in hemp or hemp enthusiasts or people looking to get into that business, are coming to learn how to do cast-in-place hempcrete panels that are then going to be done on an off-site location and then installed later on, hopefully in a structure that we're hoping to help build in Philadelphia with another nonprofit partner.
Okay. And how is attendance?
Attendance is sold out. So it's 2 days and we have close to 50, I think 48 was the number that we have with a couple of observers. And it's been wonderful. People have come from all parts of the country. We have South Dakota, we have somebody from New Orleans, we have people from Connecticut, New York, Vermont, as well as a few in Pennsylvania too. And we have even a person who works for the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture who signed up for the workshop too. So we have folks from all over.
Excellent. Will there be more of these? This seems really successful.
Yeah, this was like our first time doing it. So we are going to try to make this more available. My wheels are turned in for sure on how to make this kind of training more accessible and to really not only sort of give people the knowledge, but then sort of help build out the supply chain to support people who now have this really valuable knowledge. So there's a lot of work to be done and brainstorming. So we're always looking for partners. So if there's anybody out there who's interested in getting involved, investing of course, but also just with connections and government, ideas for how to, sort of bring this teaching up to scale, I'm all ears and would love to talk to people.
Okay. How is this event sort of emblematic of the overall mission of Altogether Now, Pennsylvania?
Yeah, so it's core to who we are. Altogether Now started with a mission to unite rural and urban communities to build regional and local economies that support us in our basic needs. Building materials being one of them, food, textiles, and plant medicine. Hemp is the through line through all of those focus areas of ours. So trying to really proclaim all of the amazing benefits of hemp is really who we are.
My name is Freedom, and I'm a farmer from Danbury, Connecticut.
Okay, and what do you farm in Danbury?
I'm a organic farmer, so I grow vegetables. I do bees, so I have a pollinator habitat. I'm creating a pollinator habitat. I have goats, and I grow hemp as well.
Excellent. All
Yes.
right. Well, what brought you here to the workshop?
What brought me here is the knowledge of hempcrete. We are going to start this year growing for fiber and grain in Connecticut. We are the only farmers in Connecticut that grow for fiber and grain. Everybody else is growing for CBD. So I came here to learn the different type of uses that hemp has, and one of them is hempcrete. So I came to learn as much as I can, so to see if I can use some of these applications in the work that I'm doing in Connecticut.
Excellent. How much acreage are you putting in this year for fiber?
We're doing 3 acres this year for
Okay.
fiber, but we're doing education. Right now, Connecticut is kind of, you need to do a lot of education. They're kind of behind in the knowledge of why we need hemp to grow, especially for me because I'm a regenerative producer, so I want to create healthy soils, and hemp it can help my soil be regenerative. And they're not understanding the usage of hemp. They only go by the CBD, and I don't want to grow CBD anymore. I grew CBD for 2 years and I lost a lot of money. So now I'm trying to pivot, and I'm growing 3 acres this year and try it out and start doing the education that is needed in Connecticut.
Excellent. What's the name of your farm?
My farm is Cimarron Farmstead, Seamarron Farmstead in Danbury, Connecticut.
Excellent. And then what have you gotten out of the workshop so far? What have you learned?
One of the things that I learned that you got to start small. You can't think that the industry is gonna make you a lot of money. You got to start the education and start pushing people to understand that hemp is the way. And that's the main thing that I got from here. And building community. I built a lot of new relationships and rebuild in old relationships. So that's all it is with hemp, is how can you build community and push hemp forward.
My name is Tia Campbell. I'm the founder of Token Timber. I'm also the treasurer of the Pan-African Hemp Association.
And what brings you out here to Bartow, Pennsylvania today?
Well, I'm here for this Hemp Creek workshop, which has been going great. This is the second day I've been here, and I'm looking to learn as much as I can and help educate others on the African continent as well as other places throughout the world.
Excellent. Can you tell me a bit about the work you're doing in Africa?
Well, right now I'm mentoring mostly a couple Nigerians. I have a small shop that I'll be opening in Ghana. And it's slow moving in Nigeria because they haven't legalized hemp yet, but we're hoping to get there in the next few years.
All right. What sort of lessons are you learning here today that you'll be able to share with various communities?
Well, this is something that's definitely community driven, so we need a community to do this type of work, probably more than 10 people, so it's definitely great for Africa and other rural places who don't have access to big machinery and things like that, but it's a great workshop.
Yeah. Tell me about Token Timber.
Token Timber is an educational company that's out here trying to destigmatize cannabis in African countries. So it's slow going with a lot of projects that are going on in Africa, but we're definitely moving along no matter what.
My name is David Turner. I'm from Transition Town Greater Media. We started a hemp study group. We're out here in Bartow, Pennsylvania, learning how to make some hempcrete panels. So thank you very much for coming out, and hopefully we can get some of these things up and into the world.
Yeah. What was the most surprising thing you learned here?
Most surprising thing you learned here is you got to be careful because the caustic nature of the lime can burn you. So please be sure to use your safety equipment.
Good tip.
That's
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ken Meyer from South Dakota with Complete Hemp Processing.
And you drove all the way here from South Dakota.
Yes,
And what are you doing here?
learning about hempcrete building from Cameron McIntosh and the rest of the team here.
All right. Can you tell me what you do in South Dakota?
We just opened a hemp decortication facility.
Did you get the fiber track?
Yes,
Nice. And so you're running it now?
yes, yep, every day, Monday through Friday.
All right. Do you do much cast in place? Do you think you will?
I'm learning about it. The most interesting hempcrete project that I'm involved in, we're trying to figure out how to do a storage facility for bees in the winter, a place to winter bees over, since we're also involved in the beekeeping industry.
Nice. Cool. And then who's working with you here?
Here I have Maxon Keating, who's also from South Dakota.
Hello. You rode with him out here?
Oh yeah, no, it's been a good hemp experience.
Good. All right.
So-
And you stopped a few places on your way, right?
Yes.
Where'd you
Yep.
stop?
The first stop was to make it to Chicago, outside of Chicago, and that's where we participated in helping. That's where they were working on genetics and understanding different growers so they can help, purchase from farmers and move product. And then it was outside of Detroit is where we actually participated in doing some hempcrete at inside a house that they're renovating. And then Newcastle, which a big nonprofit that's helping communities and also trying to get into the hemp business with the processing facility. And then learning how to build here. I'm a builder and organic grower permaculture guy, so it's
Cool.
all coming together.
All right.
Appreciate
I met
you
Freedom
inviting me.
already. Hello, Freedom. How's it going here?
Wow,
You enjoying this?
it's a beautiful process.
All right. Thanks, guys. All right, so there you go. You heard Ken Meyer there from South Dakota. I just talked about him on last week's News Nuggets. His company just opened up their processing plant there in South Dakota. But yeah, it was great. There was a ton of people there. I didn't get a chance to talk to everybody, but I did meet a lot of interesting people. And just one shout out to Sophia. She works with Let's Talk Hemp. I was surprised to see her there. I met her out at NOCO. Actually, I think I met her for the first time at the Southern Hemp Expo back in 2021. Anyway, it was cool to see, a fellow hemp traveler there. She has a similar role to play as I do here in the hemp space, where we're documenting the growth of the industry and sharing stories and whatnot. And what was really cool is that she is a fellow ukulele player, so we did get to spend a little time playing ukuleles together. So shout out to you, Sophia. All right, well, that does it for today's show. Thank you for listening. Do appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments or concerns or whatever, just reach out to me. I love to hear from people who listen to our show, people who are passionate about industrial hemp. My name is Eric Harlock. I'm the digital editor at Lancaster Farming newspaper, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. That's it. Check us out online at lancasterfarming.com. And until next time, I'll see you in the newspaper.
Industrial hemp.
Season 3, Episode 16 is copyright 2023 by Lancaster Farming newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show was written, recorded, edited, and produced by Eric Harlock. The music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.